Putin News Now. How to make sense of Putin's post-mutiny public appearances. Putin, where are you? 2 days after a dramatic insurrection by the Wagner Group, in which a convoy of mercenary fighters headed for Moscow, we spent most of Monday wondering about this very thing. Late on Saturday, a spokesman for Mr. Putin announced an agreement to end the Wagner mutiny. When, though, would the president weigh in on the contentious pact? Wagner's mercenaries staged a mutiny, seizing military sites, apparently easily, and marching on Moscow, sparking outrage because Russian Air Force pilots had been killed in the uprising. However, in exchange for ending the uprising, the Kremlin agreed not to prosecute Wagner fighters or their leader, Yevgeny Prigozhin. In an apparent effort to restore calm, President Putin has made a series of unusual public appearances over the past week, all of which have been broadcast on television. On Monday, Mr. Prigozhin will share his side of the story through an audio message he will post online. He claims his men are on their way to Moscow to hold to account the leaders he believes made mistakes in the Ukraine conflict. Then, as night falls, a declaration is made. Putin will make an address to the nation, so please be patient. The leader of the Kremlin appears to be playing catch-up at this point. After 10 p.m., Putin is shown on television. It's highly unusual for him to make a speech so late at night. Some say this speech will decide the fate of Russia, and the internet is buzzing with speculation. We fearfully turn on Russian TV to catch the president's address. It becomes immediately apparent that this speech will not determine the fate of the nation. There are no major developments to report. Although brief, the speech gives some insight into how the Kremlin plans to portray the dramatic events of the weekend. Putin portrays a Russia that has come together to overcome the betrayal of Wagner's leaders. He extends gratitude to the Russian people, Russian government officials, religious leaders, the Russian armed forces, and his security services in an effort to win over as many people as possible. Wagner regulars, such as soldiers and commanders, are praised as patriots, while mutiny leaders are condemned. Importantly, he portrays himself as the hero who prevented widespread bloodshed. He claims that, as soon as these events began to unfold, measures were taken to avoid spilling blood, in accordance with his direct instructions. Do you recall the uproar I was referring to earlier? He completely avoids the issue. Nonetheless, it's good to see that Russia has pulled back from the edge. That's really the crux of it. Russian authorities are putting on a lot of show at a hastily planned event. The cathedral square of the Kremlin is lined with some 2,500 soldiers, Russian Guard, and security officials. The route of the coronation and burial processions of Russian czars passed through this area. President Putin walks down the red-carpeted steps of the Kremlin onto the square, where he addresses his troops against the backdrop of the onion domes of the cathedrals that make up the Kremlin. But the visuals speak volumes even before he opens his mouth. Everything you need is right here. The Kremlin, the president, and the army. This phrase makes me think of the Imperial Russian rallying cry, for faith, for the Tsar and the fatherland. In other words, the overarching theme here is to give the impression that Russia is solidly behind Vladimir Putin. It's almost as if they want the Russian people to believe that the church, the military, and the president are all connected, or even interdependent. In his brief address, Russian President Vladimir Putin repeated his earlier claim that the country has healed from the Wagner mutiny. However, the vast majority of his remarks are tributes to his armed forces for putting an end to a civil war. A moment of silence has been observed for the fallen Air Force pilots. The president has paid his respects, but he has not yet explained why those responsible for the deaths of the Wagner fighters have not been brought to justice. Done talking. The flag should be raised and the national anthem played. The president is not solely in charge, is the gist of the message. He just won a major battle with the help of the Russian armed forces and the Russian people. This Putin video has to be the biggest shocker of the week, if not the year. That's because Putin we see here is engaging in some very uncharacteristic close-quarters diplomacy with the masses. Putin's official visit to Dagestan is to preside over a conference on domestic tourism. Later on Russian television, however, it isn't the meeting that takes center stage. It's the insanity that unfolds afterward. The leader of the Kremlin is shown being surrounded by fans in Derbent. We're used to Vladimir Putin keeping his distance from the people he meets. Do you recall Putin sitting safely at one end of those massive Kremlin tables while his guests crowded around the other? Not in this location. In Dagestan, he is seen giving smooches to kids, hugs to women, handshakes, and photo ops. The official media eats it up. There was screaming, squealing, applause, the host of a popular Russia 1 talk show exclaimed. Not even famous musicians are treated like this. The West is laughing at the idea that the president has been weakened by Prigozhin's mutiny. That wasn't the case, and this evidence confirms it. Putin's actions are so unlike him. However, it seems like nothing is normal anymore in Russia. The Russian leader had narrowly escaped an armed uprising. Maybe he wants to prove that he still has supporters, both to the public and to the political establishment. What we need is a public display of spontaneous adulation. Looking at these photos brings back vivid memories of what transpired last weekend, after the agreement was reached to put an end to the mutiny. On Saturday night, as Wagner fighters led by Mr. Prigozhin left Rostov, they were met with cheers from the city's citizens. Has Russian President Putin viewed these photos? What about the need for a hero moment, if any, does he have? Most likely, we'll never find out.